Friends, from time to time, people send me links to various articles or videos where some drawbacks of Montenegro are described, and they ask me to share my thoughts on the matter. So, just the other day, someone sent me a link to an article titled, "We Didn't Stay in Montenegro," or rather, "Why We Didn't Stay in Montenegro and Then Moved Here for Permanent Residence." Actually, the title of the article itself isn't entirely clear. It's not clear whether they didn't stay in Montenegro or, on the contrary, they moved there. The title just isn't quite right. But that's not the point. By the way, the article itself is well written, quite interesting. I liked it. Maybe you should find it and give it a read. It's divided into two parts. The first part is about the advantages of Montenegro. I won't talk about those because, first of all, I completely agree with them, and secondly, I've mentioned the same advantages many times in my own videos. So basically, I don't even have anything to comment on here. And the second part of the article is about the disadvantages of Montenegro. This is where I want to go into detail. There are some points I agree with, some I don't, and some I partially agree with, but it's worth discussing. So, the author of the article writes, "What are the downsides of living in Montenegro that we noticed? It's impossible to receive money from foreign companies. We specifically opened the company in order to work legally with a number of international companies and pay taxes on our income. But since January 2020, Montenegrin banks have been refusing to accept incoming payments to company accounts from foreign accounts. Even if there is an official contract and invoice, this is just some kind of fairy tale that I've been hearing more and more often lately. The last time I opened a transit account, that is an account needed for international transactions, was yesterday. In other words, we provide not only immigration services but also accounting services. Accordingly, I've told people many times already, if you can't open something yourself or get something done, contact your accountant. If your accountant can't do it, change your accountant. Any company, whether Russian that is foreign for Montenegro or local, can easily open a transit account and use it for international transactions. This has never been prohibited by anyone. In fact, it would be silly to even try to ban it. So, accordingly, your company can also carry out certain international operations. It's actually very simple to do. So, size, it really does matter. Montenegro is a small country. All the towns have about 18 to 20,000 people, not counting the capital. People's needs are simple here. You won't find anything particularly special. Need a good laptop or the latest gadget, you'll have to go to Serbia or Croatia. It's not available here. So, look, the selection of goods and services here really is worse than in many other countries. She's right. I completely agree with that. I won't argue. Although, the availability of goods and services improves every year. And in the 9 years that I've lived in Montenegro, the market has developed tremendously. So now, the range of goods, services, and certain products has become significantly larger. As for Croatia and Serbia, which she mentions, Serbia and Croatia are fairly large countries. Well, of course, not as big as Russia, but still quite large countries. If you're talking about Belgrade, for example, the capital of Serbia, or Zagreb, the capital of Croatia, yes, I absolutely agree with you. Of course, the availability of goods there is on a completely different level. But if you're talking, for example, about Dubrovnik, the closest city to us in Croatia, or about Zagreb, one of the closest cities in Serbia to us, then it's still a question of where the availability of goods is better, here or there. That is, everything is clear. Of course, people from Dubrovnik can go to Zagreb, spend probably 5 or 6 hours on the road and do their shopping there. Well, I can also go to Zagreb, it'll just take me an hour longer. So, for example, residents of Dubrovnik will get there in 6 hours and I'll get there in 7. So the difference really isn't that big. Yeah. Now, about cigarettes. Even though a law banning smoking in public places and indoors was passed back in 2019, there are still some establishments in Montenegro where it's smoky, where people smoke inside. Yes, people smoke indoors, and that's considered normal. People can smoke in elevators, in hospitals, in cafes, in restaurants, anywhere. You can go into a restroom in a shopping mall and it will be filled with smoke. That was the reality in 2020. All of this is not true. Since the law on smoking was passed in 2019, people have stopped smoking indoors. In particular, no one smokes in restaurants or any other enclosed spaces. In open areas such as restaurant terraces, smoking is allowed, and people do smoke there. So, what you're saying, what you're writing isn't entirely true. I can accept that you went into a shopping mall restroom and it really was smoky in there. Yes, it's possible that some irresponsible person went in and secretly smoked in the restroom because they were too lazy to go outside. Or maybe it was because it was raining outside at the time. But that's more of an exception than the rule. In general, people don't smoke in enclosed spaces at all. And as for passing the law, by the way, it's a very good law. Basically, the problem with people not accepting smoking has pretty much been solved. Now, if you want to go to a restaurant, go ahead. Find any enclosed restaurant, even in the summer where it's air conditioned, and no one will be smoking inside. It's prohibited, it's strictly punished, and nobody does it. Now, moving on, there's a big section of the review about the weather, so I'll read it point by point. The weather isn't all that warm. Yes, the weather in Montenegro isn't all that warm in winter. Yes, it's very rare for temperatures to drop below zero on the coast, but when it does happen, it's like an apocalypse. Let me answer right away what is meant by not all that warm in winter. Everything is relative. Compared to Cairo, I don't know what winter is like in Cairo. I've never been there in winter, but I have been there in summer. It was 60 degrees. So compared to Cairo, winter in Montenegro is, to put it mildly, cool. But if you compare it to our usual winter, when we have around +8, +7, +10 degrees, well, that's a typical winter. Sometimes it's even warmer. Sometimes it gets up to +20. I have photos where in February I'm standing outside and there's a butterfly sitting on my hand. So it was +20. It was a very warm winter. But usually it's not that warm. It's usually around +7, +8, +10 degrees. And then someone writes, it's not such a warm winter after all. Excuse me, warm. What are you comparing it to? Are you comparing it to -20 in Central Russia? Probably compared to Central Russia, this place is basically Africa. In other words, the winter is just wonderful. Yes, it could be a little warmer if it were, say, +15, +20 degrees like in California. It would probably be even better. But overall, you just can't compare it to Russia. It's very good. So, next someone writes, when a slight frost suddenly hits the coast, the water in the pipes freezes, and in the cities, the electricity gets cut off. That's all not true. Even with slight frosts, and even with severe frosts, none of that happens. I remember well, I don't remember exactly when, but I recall there was a year here. I forget exactly when, but I was already living here at the time, and I experienced that year. It was the coldest in the last 80 years. The temperature dropped to either -2 or -3 degrees. Well, for Montenegro, that's considered a severe frost, just absolutely severe. Those who live here now, well, only the very oldest people, some elderly folks, they remember like back in some year, maybe in the early 2000s or the beginning of the 20th century, there was a similar year, a similarly cold year. That's it. And even then, nothing was ever shut off. So if something does get shut off, it's just that you don't know Serbian. All of this is written about in the newspapers. It's not related to the cold weather. As a rule, outages, by the way, are actually very rare. If there is an outage, in the vast majority of cases, it's due to scheduled maintenance, which is announced in the newspapers, like on such and such a day, for example, the day after tomorrow. In a certain district of a certain city at a certain time, there will be no electricity. This is because, for example, we are repairing a particular facility. That's it. So it's absolutely normal, absolutely civilized. You've been warned. On this day, at this time, don't stay at home, go for a walk or have some coffee. Yes, moving on. I should note that there is no central heating on the Montenegrin coast. Montenegrins heat their homes with firewood. Most rental housing, well, winter housing is actually designed for summer. The only heating appliances there are air conditioners. Well, first of all, there is, of course, rental housing that is visible summer housing or housing that is intended for year-round living. No one is forcing you to rent specifically summer housing. Secondly, if the housing doesn't have, if there is no Norwegian radiator in the housing, nothing is stopping you from going to Technomax, Gorenje, Tips, or Okov. And, well, in our city, for example, you can buy one in at least 4 stores. And also, there's another one not far from MAP. I don't remember what it's called, the fifth one. That's it. You go there, buy it, bring it home, set it up, hang it on the wall. In principle, it's not that expensive. You can buy it for around 100 euros. That's it. This is not a problem at all. Absolutely. As for Montenegrins heat their homes with firewood. Who heats their home with firewood? Someone who heats with firewood is usually someone who has a private house. If you have a private apartment, you generally don't have a stove. Well, in theory, I guess you could put a fireplace in an apartment, but that's just silly. So saying that Montenegrins heat their homes with firewood is incorrect. It all depends on where they live. If they live in a house, it's possible they use firewood for heating. Actually, the cost of heating with firewood and heating with electricity are almost the same. It's just that the warmth from firewood feels more pleasant. And also, if there are kids at home, children like to stoke the stove. That's why some people really do use stoves for heating. But that's not all. Next, she writes, in the apartment, everything that can possibly get moldy does. You really have to keep an eye out so you don't end up covered in mold yourself. Here I am now, filming a video. I am in an apartment where I have lived for 5 years. In 5 years, I haven't had mold here even once. The moral of this story is, don't be stingy. When buying or renting property, choose only quality options. As I've said in 100 videos already, and I am repeating for the 101st time. That's it. There's a wonderful Russian saying, a miser pays twice. This is exactly what we're talking about. Good real estate, modern, with up-to-date technology and good thermal insulation, will either not have mold at all, or it might show up, say, once every 3 years. You just wipe it off with a cloth and a special solution, and that's it. Alright, we used a heater and an air conditioner to keep warm. The electricity bill at the end of the month was terrifying. The same answer as in the previous point. Choose quality housing and you won't have any problems. If you choose poor quality, the cheapest housing, naturally you'll have a million problems. And the ones you mentioned are not even all of them, they're just part of it. That's it. Utility expenses in Montenegro are about the same as back home. In many videos, I've shown my actual expenses specifically, you can find and watch them. Yes, electricity is more expensive and you use more of it, but at the same time, there's no payment for gas, heating, or hot water. So in the end, it all balances out more or less. Exactly. The off-season is that time of year when the streets empty out, Montenegrins finally get to leisurely drink their coffee, and some people aren't swept up in the Montenegrin hustle and bustle because there's nothing to do and nothing is happening. And for some people, this is their favorite time of year. To be honest, I didn't really understand what he wrote about, because for me personally, whether it's the season or the off-season, my pace of life doesn't change at all. I work all year round, and my entertainment is pretty much the same throughout the year. Well, the only thing is, in the summer I rarely go to the beach, and in the winter I rarely go to any ski resorts. This summer I went to the beach 3 or 4 times. That's it. So basically, I can't say that summer is any different from winter, at least not for me. I think it's the same for anyone who works. As for work, I can only describe this point based on what my acquaintances and friends have told me. Work sort of exists and sort of doesn't, depending on the season. There are year-round job openings. It all depends on what you're looking for. Well, and from your data probably too. Everyone who has ever looked for a job has found one. I've talked about this a lot. I don't think I'll say anything new. So, here's what I learned in my first month. After moving here with a residence permit, not just for a winter stay with visa runs. Not all houses have an address. There are still a lot of houses where instead of an address it just says BB no number. Yes, that's really how it is. But again, it's not a serious problem. If you order some mail, yes, the first time they might not deliver it to you. Go to the post office, pick up your first package, and explain to the postal worker that this is your address and where it is located. From the second time on, the packages arrive. Maybe it's not very convenient, but that's really how it is in Montenegro. Yes, the banking system is underdeveloped. Not all banks have online banking or a mobile app. And if you transfer money within the bank, it can take several hours to reach the account. But I don't know which specific bank she uses. When I transfer money, it goes through immediately. Well, definitely within an hour. As for online banking, again, I can't say which banks she's talking about. With all the banks I've dealt with, that is all the banks in Herceg-Novi, there are probably about 7 or 8 banks here. All of them have internet banking. But there aren't any decent online stores, shops. Well, that's true. There are online stores here, but the selection is much smaller than what you're used to back home. The usual online services don't work, for example, PayPal or YouTube Music, and there are no paid apps in Google Play. I have no idea. I don't use any of those. When renting a place for a year, they ask for 6 months payment in advance. That's not true. Most property owners ask for payment for 1 month plus a refundable deposit for 1 or 2 months. So it basically turns out to be a 3-month payment. They might ask for 6 months, but that's if you arrive, say, in July. In that case, they really might ask you for 6 months payment. But the person writing this article, she arrived in January, she says so herself. Accordingly, asking someone who arrived in January to pay for 6 months is just ridiculous. Ridiculous, it's complete nonsense. But I understand why they asked her for that, because she rented some of the cheapest housing where everything is moldy and where the heating costs are high. So, since she hadn't figured things out yet, they decided, let's get 6 months payment from her so she doesn't run off anywhere. And if it's a season and she does leave, it's not a big deal, we'll just start renting to tourists. Well, this kind of thing is extremely rare. Basically, if you show up and they ask you to pay for 6 months up front, you should just turn around and leave. That's it. And look for another place to live. Well, so what else? Yeah. And as for the kind of place she rented, where she says the heating costs are enormous and all that, it's honestly better not to take something like that at all. It's completely absurd. Right. And by the way, there's actually plenty of good housing on the market, both for rent and for purchase. So choosing the absolute cheapest options just to save something like 50 euros really doesn't make any sense. Now, I want to talk separately about a small hidden pitfall when it comes to buying a car. You can buy a car either through a company or with your residence permit. You can't buy a car without a residence permit. If you buy a car with your residence permit, the license plates are issued for the duration of your permit. And every year, after renewing your residence permit, you have to get new plates. But honestly, I don't really see what the problem is here. Just renew your residence permits, your car will still be valid, and your technical certificate, your registration certificate, will also remain valid for another 2 or 3 weeks. Getting new plates takes about 3 or 4 days, so what's the problem, really? There are even special agencies that will handle all of this for you. They charge very little for their services, like 20 or 30 euros. So you just bring them your documents and say, I need to update my car documents. They'll take care of everything for you. I really don't understand what people see as a problem here. All you have to do is unscrew 2 bolts and put on the new license plate. So what's the holdup, really? So here's the list of steps you need to take. Spend some time living in Montenegro in January, February, and in July and August. These months will let you experience the worst sides of Montenegro. In the first case, you'll get the dampness, gloom, and hibernation. In the second, the hellish crowds of tourists. Well, maybe it's better to just live here for 5 years right away, think it over, and then go back home when Montenegro joins the EU. And honestly, that advice isn't very serious. Think about your source of income. As she writes, there isn't much work in Montenegro, that's a lie. But the salaries are low. That's true. But there's one small nuance. Salaries in Montenegro really are low, but it depends on what you're comparing them to. If you compare it to Switzerland, in Montenegro they pay peanuts. If you compare it, for example, with Volgograd, a Russian city, then salaries in Montenegro are about twice as high as there. So again, everything is relative. But overall, I agree that salaries in Montenegro are low, but nevertheless, if in Russia, when you get a salary, in most cases you can only live below the subsistence minimum. Here in Montenegro, you can actually live on the subsistence minimum. That's it. And besides all that, of course, not every farm from every comes to Montenegro to work. Most immigrants have a source, they receive income from other sources. So look for long-term housing options. You might be surprised by the prices, deposits, and the quality of the housing itself. Often landlords ask for several months rent in advance. Well, when you arrive, you look around, of course. Naturally, you need somewhere to live, so you'll be searching. As for that, you might be surprised by the prices, deposits, and the quality of the housing itself. The quality of housing can vary. Whatever you're looking for, that's what they'll keep offering you. So if you arrive and say, I want the cheapest apartment for 130 euros, eventually they'll offer you an apartment for 130 euros, but it will be of corresponding quality. On the other hand, if you arrive and immediately say, I want a good modern apartment, say a 2-room, one for 300 to 350 euros, then you'll be offered a completely different option. As for the deposit for several months, I just explained that payment is usually monthly plus a deposit. Usually the deposit terms vary, but most often it's for 2 months. I think these are normal conditions. I don't see anything wrong with that. Just prepare the money. Moving is always an expense. You'll need to have some savings either for starting a company and obtaining a residence permit, or for a visa run, taxes, rent, mobile service, transportation, and so on. Well, that's good advice. You do need to set aside some amount. Exactly how much depends on your situation, on what you do for a living. For example, some people move and basically nothing changes for them. If someone was working as a programmer at a computer, they just keep doing the same thing. For him, whether he moves to a different apartment in his own city or comes to Montenegro, it's basically the same level of difficulty. Someone else might be starting a business. Naturally, you need to prepare money to open the business and to get by until it starts making a profit. Some people will be working. They also need money to get a job and to get by until they start earning something. So everyone's situation is different. Some people need to save up very little, others need more. First and foremost, it depends on how you plan to earn money in Montenegro. Well, that's all. By the way, the article is written in an interesting way. It's good, although I don't completely agree, but I should mention that the people are saying they arrived in January 2020, which is just a few months ago. Moreover, the article wasn't written today, it was written even earlier. So essentially, they probably haven't fully understood everything yet. So they arrived, lived here for 2 or 3 months, and then wrote the article. Naturally, they haven't picked up on some of the minor details yet. That's why I think we can forgive them for a few small inaccuracies. That's all from me. Goodbye, everyone.